Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander.
Merrick, nice to have you on.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate you having me on and taking some time to talk a little bit. Have a quick conversation.
Yeah, no, of course, likewise. And I've found, on this show, we can never have too many perspectives on sales, hiring, training, getting salespeople ramped up. It ain't easy, right?
No, it's probably one of the more difficult things you could do. And that's to no fault of any business owner, right? Really, it's more of the system that gets people from college to graduation to their first job. And that's something we could talk about, how to really prep your entry-level sales talent, how to hire the right entry-level sales talent. But it's kind of the system. I'm going to put it that way.
Yeah, let's start there. Like, let's talk about, the man, right? The system. Like, what is it with that? It affects things, I guess. Yeah.
Man, one of the companies I run, I'm just going to take a quick second to put this in here because it does have meaning. It's a sales and recruiting bootcamp company called Hire Training. And myself and another individual created this company. His name's Ian Bethay. We created this company purely based off our experience coming out of college and getting into the real world. My dad was a music teacher. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for most parts of her life. So when I wanted to get into the corporate world, there was very little information that was strategic that they could give me at all. They didn't quite have the contacts. And I just had very little wherewithal of, one, what was I going to do? But two, even if I knew, how am I going to get there? Right. So coming out of college, for a lot of us, it's been so long ago that we kind of forget what that pressure is like. And if you don't have a plan, it becomes very difficult because one, you're not really learning much of anything related to marketing or sales in college. There might be one or two classes in each of those different verticals, but especially for marketing, I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar they're outdated, but by a large degree. And for sales, it's really outdated as well. Have you seen that as well? What's your take on that before I jump any further?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's many of any colleges teaching straight up sales. I mean, maybe some MBA program is teaching some concept of sales at some point. Yeah, and I would agree. And then there's the whole topic of how much is an MBA even worth? And that's assuming you get that far. So at the undergrad level, yeah, I agree, probably next to nothing.
Well, and look, we came to that realization too. People are not teaching younger individuals how to become proficient in marketing or selling. And I'm going to speak on the selling side a little bit more in this because that's my forte, if you will. But one of the things we wanted to create was an environment where people could not only build a foundation that is current, based off current skills, but more importantly, the way I learned how to sell, and I'm sure the way you learned how to sell, and a lot of your other viewers, it's by getting out there, failing a bunch of times, skinning your knees, sounding bad on cold calls, by accidentally sending an email that you shouldn't have, getting reprimanded by the person you sent it to. It's by building up those real life experiences. So that's
Totally.
part of the reason why we created Hire Training, which is to solve a bigger problem that many companies are tackling right now. How do we get our young generations up to speed in probably the fastest moving industries, sales and marketing?
Yeah, there's so many places to go from there. And when I think about my first foray into sales, it was sort of accidental, I guess. I mean, like I was basically hired into a hybrid role, right? So it was like part client service. It was the context of production, like producing animated videos and mostly the account side of that, the back and forth, some project management. And then also the other half of your time, you're going to be selling, we're going to be getting leads, you're going to be closing them. And I think that could have gone very badly, right? Because like there's very many people, what I've learned is that there's only two kinds of people that are fit for sales roles. One are owners, right? Because like who else is going to do it? If you're not going to do it in the early stages of a business, nobody does it. Or somebody that's like, I am a salesperson. I own this role. This is what I do. I want to get better at it. I want to close deals. What doesn't work is the person that's like, hey, in your spare time, you're going to have this hobby, like as if, it's playing an instrument or like learning a language or something. It's like that almost never works. But let me stop there. Like, what's your thought on that? Is that mapped to your experience or maybe I'm wrong?
I agree with you. I think everything is surrounded or kind of part of Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. So no matter what you do, 20% of your reps are going to give you 80% of the results. Everything in my mind follows a bell curve, right? Where a part of a sales team, you're going to have some parts of that bell curve that maybe you don't want as much, but that's just natural. When I consult any clients, I'm always trying to give them strategies to get the higher part of the bell curve, right? But still, those are very difficult people to reach. Those are difficult people to find. But when you do, it makes all the difference. So all that to say that there are plenty of people in sales, and a lot of people treat it as it's just a hobby, even if it's not.
Right. That makes sense. And I want to get back to Mr. Pareto in a second. Before that, can you to back up a bit? Can you frame out just kind of what you're doing a little more at higher training, like how you're working with companies, how you're working with the supply and the demand side, and that sort of thing?
Definitely. So, like I said, higher training was created solely for myself in the past, right? I was thinking, what could have helped me get further faster in my career, in making sales, making money, but probably most important, feeling confident. I went a long time in my first sales role feeling really unconfident because I didn't have the foundation of skills. I didn't know the rules to the game, and I had to learn that through trial and fire. Right. So that's the first thing. I see a lot of entry level people, even from an emotional stance, they're disheartened. And that's the thing that sucks the most, to be honest, or finding a company that isn't a good fit for you. What higher training does is we have a virtual program that's hybrid, both virtual at your own pace lessons and live courses and live coaching by myself on a weekly basis. Once you graduate the program, so you get through all the 22 lessons, which cover really the basics of communication, sales, and recruiting. So I'm talking about stuff like, how do I make a cold call, right? What are my first few talk tracks? What are the most common objections that I'm going to hear? What are the different emails that I can send? How do I not send spam? And probably most importantly, how do I source the right contacts? I'd say number one, I made a post about this the other day. But I remember even in my career first starting, I'm like, man, I sourced all these contacts and they were all garbage. I was just so far out of my ideal customer profile that it wasn't even funny. And the even worse part about that is I was part of the majority in my company that was probably outside of their ideal customer profile.
Yeah.
So they're paying 20 people 40 grand a year plus commissions to find 80% of the wrong people. Pareto's principle, going back at it.
Yeah. What I find interesting about that is it seems like because of the level of competition in the digital world, right? Because it's like for most solutions that people are selling, it's not that you're just competing against your direct competitors, you're competing against all the other noise, right? It's like a LinkedIn, email, phone, et cetera, not to mention ads, leads, inbound, that because of that barrier at the top of the funnel, right? The process of getting somebody to agree to speak, because that barrier has gotten so high, it seems like the BDR role, to me at least, is like completely outdated, right? The level of skills that a BDR needs, both like on a data mining front and on a technical front and on a creative front, to be able to just like get somebody to agree to speak, seems like it's like a completely different job than the communication, the knocking on doors, the dialing for dollars sort of classic role. It seems like there's a split that's happened and not enough people have acknowledged it. But that's my screed. What's your take on that?
You're totally right. And it's fed by a few different things, right? One of the things that comes top of mind is the amount of capital that is in much of our industries right now, from medical industries to tech industries. If a lot of these VCs, a lot of these private equity companies, the moment they feel that they can get traction, they're going to want you to invest in a sales team for certain companies. And the go-to market method right now for that is SDR AE. And when it comes to SDRs, we're still entrusting, in my opinion, the most important part of the entire sales process, finding quality candidates, to college students. And we're playing a numbers game. If you really think what KPIs are, it's just me not trusting you in your efforts to continuously make an effort to sell things. So I'm essentially paying for your activity, right? And saying, you need to get this or else you're going to get fired. And that's why we see such high turnover, because instead of really raising the bar from the people we hire and from how we train and how we develop our employees, We're actually just keeping the bar right where it's at, but going wider, hiring more people and saying, hey, Pareto's principle, you'll find 20% of the results we need at some point.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic on the idea of like over optimizing for the wrong metrics, at the expense of everything else. You see this all the time, where things are really legible, like apartments by square footage, as if that's the thing that really matters. It's something, it doesn't not matter, right? The number of calls an SDR makes matters, or they make 3 instead of 20 that matter. But there's some point at which like that's just not that important, right? So I guess my question for you is how do you deal with that? How do you like continue to use the metrics in the right way? Like what metrics do you look at? Because you can't look at nothing without over optimizing for the wrong things.
It really does start with how you hire, I'd say. And look, I'm gonna put a pin right in that because I've been in companies when I was a newer rep where they'd say, hey, you have to make 100 calls, right? And you have to hit this hour of talk time. And there's people that I knew that were calling fax machines, right? There are people that were calling their parents, right? And just to get the hour of talk time.
It's very Soviet, yeah.
And sometimes, there were really good reps too that might get 25 calls that were solid. They were solid, moving the needle, moving the deal forward, getting results calls, and they'd get reprimanded for not hitting their numbers. So it starts with who you hire, but even more importantly, it starts with the culture of what you value as a sales organization, right? If you only value numbers, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get a lot of numbers, right? But if you can really sit there and teach your reps your exact ideal customer profile, that's where I start. Whether it's an AE that's been selling for a while or even an SDR new off the block, you need to get with them immediately and look, spend 2 weeks. Spend the first week talking about the product. They're learning everything they can about who you sell to. Why do you sell to this industry? What kind of value do they get from your product or your service? Why do they buy it? Share stories. I try and arm all of my sales reps, if I'm consulting or in my own companies, with 2 stories at the very least, right? That can tackle at least maybe 3 objections on each piece, right? Maybe it's someone that said they originally didn't have the budget, but then later the end of the story shows that freed up more of their cash flow. Or it's someone that once at one point did this before and tried it, but they tried it again and their expectations were reversed. We need to arm our sales teams with stories, at least 1 to 3, that can counter the most common objections.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so much talk of ICPs or, in kind of like related buzzwords and acronyms and that kind of thing. Can you talk about that a little bit or illustrate it? Like what does a good ICP look like to you, and where does it live? Is this, in your experience, does this best live as a Google Doc with anecdotes and bullet points? Is it something else? Like, out of the clients that you think are doing this really well, like how are they communicating this sort of thing and in keeping it alive, I guess?
So I put everything on Google Docs. So I'm a little too biased. From my standpoint, as it relates to selling, I see the ICP as your main kind of foothold against allowing bad contacts or bad companies to enter your CRM. So if I'm coaching somebody, I'm telling them to not only keep it on the Google Doc, but look, print this out, put it right next to your computer. And when you spend that 1 hour to 1 hour 30 sourcing, I want you to constantly be looking at that to make sure everything fits. And look, if some things don't fit, bring it up to your manager, have a conversation about it, because they're probably going to know something that you don't know. Because let's be honest, most ideas are not original, right? And someone has probably tried to prospect that type of company that you've tried and either failed or succeeded. So if there's something out of the ICP, I go, look, talk to your manager. If there's something in the ICP, I want that higher value data into my CRM. So that's where I start. The second piece where you kind of bring life to the ICP is through the stories, right? So if I were to train up a new sales rep, I'm spending 1 week on product training, very heavy. Where do we develop value? What are our fallbacks, right? And then the next week, I'm really trying to ingrain stories and objection training that is to the most common objections, either in general sales, right? Not interested, not enough money. We already do that, whatever, but also to your product.
Makes a lot of sense.
And from that, you should have a sales rep that goes, okay, I understand. And the more time you spend in that arena, the more value you're going to get from that rep.
And by that arena, you mean the ICP arena?
ICP and training.
Right. Let's
ICP plus stories.
Makes sense. And to get into training a little bit more, we've hired a number of salespeople, and granted, slightly different thing, maybe mid-career person selling into agencies. And then for our clients, it's agencies selling into bigger companies and that kind of thing. But same idea in a lot of ways. And I've been at this for a long time, right? So I've been on thousands of calls, and we have all these recordings and all this stuff. And there's things that, I can kind of get away with that maybe a newer person can't, because I can fix it if something doesn't work, kind of fly by the seat of my pants or whatever. But overall, the process is pretty well defined. We know that it works. So I think one challenge we've had in the past is like, what's the right level of management or micromanagement? Scripting can work really well. We found too much scripting doesn't work. then people are too constrained. And the fact is, like, when we hire good salespeople, they're better than me in some ways. There's things they do better. There's things I do better. So it's kind of a tough question, but how do you find that right level of constraint versus letting people do their own style and go their own way?
Well, that all starts with hiring too, right? You have to hire styles that I think, you feel will be most applicable to who you're selling to and who you're managing or how you manage, right? So if I'm selling to a lot of IT professionals, I might get someone that is a little bit more tech savvy versus someone that's more of like a quick one flip type of, I'm going to hard sell you on the phone type of deal. And you have consultation based selling as well as more transactional, right? And both of those have different management styles. But I do want to make a point. I only train entry-level reps right now, right? So that is I get you from crawling to walking, from going from walking to running, and then to sprinting, and then driving a car and racing down there. That is a different field. But from an entry-level rep, I really try to make everything about memorizing before you personalize. So, hey, look, we're creating scripts for a reason, right? And I ask them, hey, look, think about your favorite movie. What is it? I kind of want to know myself. And they'll say, whatever, Interstellar. And I go, well, guess what? Matt McConaughey was reading off a script. You really thought it was emotional though, right? Yeah, okay. Well, that's why we read off a script. So we start there, and I'll be quizzing them, periodically through the week, just trying to get it ingrained in their head. But at a certain point, I want them just to have the bullet points. I'm the type of guy that, like I said, I'll hang everything right on the side of my computer when I'm starting to pitch something new. But I want them to have bullet points of their main value props, their main cold call tactics and cold call scripts. I want them to get to that point where that allows them to kind of freestyle a little bit more than just reading off a script.
Yeah, it makes sense. And, the fact that you're working with newer salespeople, I think is one thing, but overall, the art of training, or not the art, the process of training, the process of sales is more in common across the board than, with any particular area of that. So with that in mind, what does that cadence look like? Like, if you have, whether it's a mid-career, late career, early career, you've hired a new salesperson at your company, like, what should you be planning for? How much are you talking with them? How much time should you be devoting to training?
You have to be able to devote a lot, right? To be quite honest, there's a lot of startups that they'll come to me and they'll be like, Merrick, we're interested in getting some SDRs from your program, or we're interested in getting recruiters from your program. And to cap off what we originally started in the beginning of this podcast, what Hire Training does, simply, we train new grads or people looking to change their careers into entry-level sales or recruiting. And then we match them with various offers from recruiting companies, medical companies, tech companies, you name it. So we want to get them trained up. We want to build the foundation, build real world skills, and then we want to get them offers and make a connection that not only allows our clients to ramp up quicker because they have foundational skills, but allows the relationship to be more solid. And it's kind of a win all around. But I'll get people asking me, hey, I think I'm ready for SDRs, right? I've been selling this for a while and I'm ready to take the leap. I very rarely, if anytime, ever suggest that they go SDRs first. Unless they have an immense amount of time, then I might say, all right, you're still going to have to be the account executive. You have to manage their expectations. Because if you bring on 2 SDRs and you don't have a sales team right now, you're going to get a boatload of questions. You're going to have to train them for at least, I'd say, 6 weeks, 3 weeks more intensively, 3 weeks kind of lower touch, but you're going to have to be there for them. And guess what? You're still going to have to go on those meetings. You're still probably the closer. SDRs are SDRs. They set appointments, high value appointments, which is very important. But guess who's coming in and taking that time? And look, if you want them to evolve into the AE that you want, be ready to spend even more time taking them on those appointments, showing them, hey, these are the ropes. This is why I said that. So the quick answer is, if you're a startup and you feel you want SDRs and you're hung up on that, be ready to put a lot of time into these people. I would usually recruit 2 SDRs as well, because more often than not, one might fall through, but we also want to kind of A/B test, right? If you have one person coming through and they're just not getting your training and it just seems to be going downhill, we really don't know if that's you or them. If we have 2 people and one of those people is going downhill, then we have a better vantage point at where we can pinpoint either our bottlenecks or what's going wrong and find the mistake. Is it the training? Is it the people we hired? What attribute is it of the people that I hired,
Right.
et cetera?
I was just going to connect to that with the emotional element, right? So how do you build confidence? How do you build confidence in these people? Like, is there a way that you can do it without BSing anyone, because it is performance based. They do have to hit numbers in order to stick around. I know it doesn't matter if it's an SDR, AE, whatever. So how do you do that?
That's probably one of the toughest parts. And just to finish off too, for anyone that is a startup looking at building their sales team, if you are going to go the SDR route, prepare to put a lot of time in, have enough money where you could get 2 SDRs so you could really A/B test everything. But there are 2 other options. One is finding a more experienced account executive, right? Or a more experienced full sales cycle rep that could take things from open to close. You're still going to have to spend time with them. You're spending time with them no matter what. And then the other solution would be working with an outsourced company, right? Much like your own, right? Where you're supplementing that kind of sales burden and or marketing burden to get to a point where you could either hire the 2 SDRs or the AE. So there's various ways you could go. But from a confidence standpoint, how I do that, I start with my training, right? And I start by getting them before they have to go into their first sales role at higher training to make sure that they understand, hey, look, you are going to get hung up on. You are going to get told no all day. And at higher training, once they graduate, we have 2 weeks called Sales Lab, where the first week we just work on email copywriting and sourcing and understanding your ideal customer profile. And the second week, they go and make real calls. I want to prepare them to get all the kinks out, right? Make your mistakes right now. Get told no right now, but get back up. And look, I'm not doing rocket science here. Sales isn't rocket science. It's about taking massive action, taking massive activity, and then tweaking it. And part of the reason and part of the way we could build confidence is just by, from a sales perspective, having a no sheet. Look, I'm going to get 25 no's today. You don't stop till you get 25 no's. It's redefining what a good day's like.
Yeah, that works in lots of powerful ways, right? That reframe and just counting the no's. I've definitely done that in our process before, and it does help. Where it's like, I've got to rack up another 9 of these to get a yes, basically, and it completely changes things. So I get that. Yeah,
you got to gamify it totally, right? And when I was in my last corporate role, I would literally make a game where I'd say, one call is worth 5 points, one email is worth 5 points, a LinkedIn message is worth 5 points, and me sending a video is worth 10, right? And if I source all 25 new contacts I need to source today, I get 25 points. And I'd set a goal of hitting 150 or 200. And if I could get all my activities, I knew that it was a good day. That
Right.
metric, it wasn't, hey, did I make a sale today? Hey, did I get a meeting today? It was how much valuable activity can I put in the day? And that will be a win if I achieve it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think the emphasis is on valuable activity, right? So you have to define those things really well. And connected to that, I know that you're kind of sourcing entry level talent, helping them get jobs in the startup world and in medical and other areas. So, but that said, my guess is in a lot of, especially in a startup, like in a newer venture or an agency, like a lot of our listeners that might not have had to teach somebody else how to do this ever. There's a lot of kind of like figuring out process for the first time, really. Even if you have product market fit, there's not really a defined sales process. So it's hard to figure out like everything that all the ways to do that right, because it's kind of situational. But what are the things that you most commonly see go wrong? Like, I don't know if the situation's happened, but where you get that call on the phone and a client's like, hey, you sold me the lemon, like this guy or this girl is no good. And once you dig into things, you're like, no, you guys don't have anything in order. Like, what does that usually look like? What are the mistakes people make in terms of setting up salespeople for success?
So in selling a lemon, right? That just goes back to maybe that first week where you're talking about who we sell to, why we sell to them, how they get value, what the product is, and how it builds value. Because a lot of that can be attributed to maybe selling to the wrong type of person, right? People can force sales, right? Great salespeople can sell people stuff that they don't need. And that's where you get to that point where now you're wasting time. Now you have a bad review because you didn't train your salesperson in the ICP and who buys this and why. And now you have an angry customer that got sold a lemon, even though you told your sales rep, hey, this is an apple, right? We sell to people that like apples. That was actually, I think I got that metaphor reversed. So
I got it. No, that works.
From a process standpoint, whenever I'm looking at a sales process, whether it's transactional or a little bit more complex, a consultative sale, the name of the game is how do I make this easy for the person that's buying? Even something good for an organization is change, and change is uncomfortable for everyone. If I said, Dan, look, I'm going to give you a McLaren tomorrow, and look, it's great, I'm gonna give it to you for free, right? You'd be like, yippee, but you still have to go through changing your insurance. You might have to go through selling your own car, right? You might have to go through re-registering, and that's all a pain, even though it's positive change. So whenever I'm looking at a process, I want to imagine, how do I create a frictionless and seamless way in the least amount of steps that my buyer can purchase my service?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I like that metaphor. And earlier, we kind of started the interview with the 80-20, Pareto thing. Let's talk about talent a little bit and sourcing talent. Like, are there, from working with lots of salespeople at an early career phase, are there commonalities that you see where if you're like, if I see this or I don't see that, I know I have somebody good, or I know that this isn't going to work? Like, are there any tangible examples of that you've picked up on over the years?
A lot of it is around heart, right? A lot of it too is in the interview. I think one of the best interview questions I was ever asked was in an interview, and they said, what if I told you you couldn't do this job? And what they were getting at with that question was they were seeing how I'd handle some level of rejection. And they were also seeing if I'd ask questions, right? So in an interview, if someone is armed with questions, it means they put in the work to see, hey, this is what Dan's group is all about. This is what Merrick's group is all about. I know what to ask. I know what to ask about the market, about the competitors. That's a green flag. If they have good questions, one, they're very interested, but two, they're doing their homework, right? Which is foreshadowing in many ways future work ethic. Two is if they're inquisitive about asking a lot of questions during the conversation. So not only like the end of the interview questions, but really digging in to what you do, why you do it, asking you those maybe sometimes difficult questions, but that shows a natural curiosity, which is integral in anyone that's going to be selling, running discovery calls, etc. And then those are the two main things I look at, to be quite honest, right? Because it's showing me effort and it's showing me how they naturally communicate.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm going to steal that question. I've asked versions of that, but I think that's more concise. I think I've asked questions like, and I think I stole this from somewhere else, but if we're 3 months in and this didn't work, what do you think went wrong, or 6 months in or whatever? And that will
That's great.
sometimes get interesting answers because the better answers are sort of just like, people's natural tendency is to not put any blame on the employer and just to say, like, well, it means that I messed up or something like that, as opposed to anticipating the ways in which they might not be supported in the right way. The latter is better, I think, which is interesting. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Look, don't skimp out. That's a great question, but hold your interviewer's feet to the fire, right? It's okay to put them through role plays. It's okay to want more for the person you're going to bring into your organization. And
Yeah.
that's how we start going back to what we were saying before, where you have these organizations that just have multiple SDRs that are doing a fraction of the work that one great SDR could do. That's how we start to get more lean. That's how we start to reevaluate, what does the sales and marketing, entry level industry or engine look like? And in my opinion, in the future, I'm going to pay SDRs the most money, right? Whenever I have an SDR role and I'm at a place where I can really shovel in, that is the most important job in a company, in my opinion, right? Sales guy, I'm biased. Look, I'm doing a lot of marketing right now, so that's important too. But bringing quality information in a very personal way is priceless. So I think if we were to reevaluate some things, I'm paying the account executive, probably similar to what they are now, but I am ramping up the compensation and the commission for SDRs. I want to
Yeah.
create an
Sorry, go ahead.
SDR environment that is just really aces, right? The top of the top. So, sorry, I interrupted.
Well, it's hard for me to disagree because that's an argument for both of our businesses getting paid a lot more, right? So that's good. I guess my question is why? Like, why do you think SDRs should be making more?
Because if we get more qualified at bats on a deal, then our account executives will be able to close them more. Right now, account executives are overwhelmed because although they are experts that have been maybe an SDR for 5 years and selling for 3 years, they're overwhelmed because they're getting leads from someone that just stopped drinking beer every Wednesday and Thursday and Friday night at college. There is a obvious educational and skill bottleneck because of this. And if I can take someone who's baller SDR, maybe in an account executive role right now, but I say, look, I'm going to increase your pay. I'm going to make you a very opportunistic commission plan, but all I want you to do is SDR work. I guarantee you that one SDR that I brought is worth at least 5 or 6 college students.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems like there's like I talked about earlier, it seems like there is a misalignment, in terms of like the sophistication that's required at top of funnel these days, especially when you're talking about complex industries, competitive industries, and that sort of thing. So that's really cool. Merrick, kind of getting towards the end of our time, how can people follow what you're up to, get in touch and all that good stuff?
So you could find me on LinkedIn. I have my direct messages open there. So if you do want to talk, Merrick Colmer at LinkedIn, feel free to give us a follow on LinkedIn, Instagram, and even TikTok. We're starting TikTok now. It's a conversation in itself, but hire training, that's HIRE, like being hired, then training.com. And if you have any questions about how to get into your ideal career, how to make a career pivot, I'm always more than happy to talk about that. That's something that I needed when I was in that spot. So if I could pay it forward, I'm always happy to.
Awesome. Thanks, Merrick. Yeah, really appreciate your time.
Hey, take care. See ya.